I keep on turning on my mic. That's 2 times this year. Bad host, bad host. What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations, and I'm the host of Epic Conversations, 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner, 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. I also co-produce and co-host the only online show in the world for dads and fathers. It's sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care, and being part of that team over the last 2 years, so that's 2022 and 2021, reached out to over 100,000 fathers directly and indirectly around the world. And as always, I like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles and a solution for someone's problem. And looking forward to another epic conversation, because this is the home of Epic Conversations and I'm the home of Epic Conversations. So before we get into our new friend we're going to be having on the platform today, a few things as always. If you haven't, subscribe to the Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube. And when you subscribe, also put on the notification bell. So when you subscribe, that's one thing. Notification, that gets you notified. Makes sense. Notification, notify when we're doing upcoming live conversations. And also like it on YouTube, Facebook, wherever you're watching this, subscribe. And because we are in this mode right now, also, and I'm broadcasting live on January 19th. I just finished today the first time I was asked to do a presentation on launching a podcast. First time. And it was in collaboration with an organization called Innovation Guelph. And great turnout, great questions, and they want me back. So that's a good thing. So I'm coming back on February 2nd and February 16th to talk about all things podcasting. If you want to join me for, well, it's not going to be, it's part of a 3-part highly interactive series. There's the link right there. And I like to say there were people from the Dr. Vibe Show family that came in and supported. I was jacked about that. So if you want to know about podcasting, I give you some takes. Now, it's not about me anymore. It's about our new friend. Pierre DeBois is the founder of Zimana, an analytics services firm that helps organizations, achieve profitability improvements in marketing, web development, and business operations. His company has provided services for clients in many industrial verticals. He's done many digital marketing and analytic workshops, too many that I'm not going to list here right now, but his workshops have covered the gamut of business, data science, digital marketing topics with a focus on JavaScript frameworks, Google Analytics, marketing, and R programming. He's also an analytics and business intelligence writer, and he's contributed to platforms such as CMS Wire's top digital marketing articles. He's also been featured in the Chicago Sun-Times and was a presenter at Google Get Your Business Online program in 2017. He is a Prairie View A&M graduate mechanical engineering and a Georgia Tech MBA graduate, and he's the native of Gary, Indiana. That's the home of some family called the Jacksons. And he's, so he's been serving small businesses and organizations throughout the United States. We're going to be finding out a little bit more about Pierre and also talking about digital marketing, analytics, tech, and what trends are happening among Black businesses. So let's welcome for the first time, but not the last time, Pierre DeBois. What is going on, Mr. Pierre?
Hi, good evening. Good evening. I hope you can hear me okay.
I can hear you okay. I'm just going to go off camera because my camera, I don't like the way my camera looks, so I'm just going to adjust that right now and take that, and let's see if this does better. That's better. Wonderful. If I can't look good, at least I want the background to look good. You know what I'm saying?
There you go. That's all right.
Good stuff. How's your day been?
My day's been pretty good. A little hectic today, but just doing pretty well. I'm actually doing a little bit more tutoring over the last year or so. It's kind of been the big thing. You mentioned about analytics, just a little bit about my background. One part of that is dealing with data models, and this is kind of creating up with little forecasts, and there's programming languages that will help you do that, R and Python. And I've actually been tutoring a few PhD students over the last year or two at the University of District of Columbia. So that's been a pretty big challenge, but I'm enjoying that just the same too. So
it sounds like that's time consuming. Just by the way you describe me, it sounds time consuming, is it?
Yeah, it can be. But I think this is I think this is a challenge for everybody. Black owned businesses in particular, I think are challenged. I think we have a lot of great options, which
Mhm.
is terrific. And I know you and I had talked about this before. I think it helps us in communicating and talking to each other and finding resources. If you go back to the days
Mhm.
of the Green Book, the idea of, trying to find, who was that black barber, who was
Yeah.
that black beautician, and so forth. We still have a little bit of that going on now and finding resources, but it's now digital. And I
Yep.
think it helps us for finding the right people, but it also means that it's a challenge in trying to make good decisions too. So there you
Excellent.
go.
Excellent. So let's talk about your young days growing up in Gary.
Okay.
Let's find out. So what was young Pierre all about growing up in Gary, Indiana?
Well, a little different than I am now, but no moonwalking, unfortunately. Can't moonwalk. I
You
always
mentioned
tell,
that the first time we met.
yeah.
That's one of your
I,
standard lines.
I'm just going to say, I always tell people like, moonwalking there's all this trademark, you can't do that. But I am a part of the Rhythm Nation. I'll say that, so it's okay.
All
So
right. There you go.
Janet's
There
a little
you
bit more
go.
generous.
Nice.
Gary has been my hometown. I was born in '69. And I grew up with a very big passion for automobiles. In fact, I wanted to be an automotive engineer. So a lot of my time in Gary was growing up. I used to make model cars out of cardboard. That was my hobby.
Oh,
And that
okay.
gave me the interest in automobiles enough to go in and do go to Purdue and then eventually the Prairie View to do engineering as a mechanical engineering student, and then go into Ford Motor Company and worked at Ford for 8 years as an engineer.
Wow.
So those
Okay.
were, yeah. So and Gary is you hear a lot of some negative on Gary a little bit. Gary is sort of Gary's history, if you want to look at it, is really not any different than say a Detroit, but there's a big asterisk where cities like a Detroit or Cleveland have had things to kind of help pull them out. You got to look at things like Gary, Flint, all these smaller areas that have had a black history to it. Not quite a Wakanda, but maybe a Wakanda Heights, so to speak. Basically, if you want to use a Black Panther analogy, where
Yeah.
they've sort of struggled a little bit in trying to get back, and you had this sort of exodus of black professionals out of the area. If you go here now, there's still some folks here, and there's a lot of good people are Gary's kind of hit that bottom. It's kind of been coming back, but population size had dropped off just like it did in Detroit and and in Cleveland, that type of spot. But there's still it was always a little bit of a struggle to kind of keep professionals in the area. That's always been kind of a challenge. But as I moved around and as I got older as an adult, I met people from different areas. One person I remember, she was from East. I remember because we dated for a little bit of time, basically. But she was from East St. Louis, and she was more defensive about East St. Louis than I was about Gary. That was the thing that was funny.
Oh,
So
okay.
so there's people, there's some of us in areas that are not like a Detroit or a Cleveland or a South Side of Chicago. There's and I know that in Canada it's the same thing too. There's part of the diaspora or part of our population is in areas that have had traditional areas of black people. I learned the other day about Waterloo, Iowa, which I didn't know had a really serious I think they just got the first black mayor in the last several years, but they've had a small black population there. And I think the core of it is black, but then the surrounding areas are a little bit more multicultural. But those sort of areas have existed for a while, and they're part of our history as a people, and also impact us in terms of black businesses as well. So,
Wow. Was it hard leaving Gary? And also, do you ever go back?
I'm based in Gary now, so that's
Okay.
been a good thing. So the answer to that last question is yeah, you can come back. But I came back more for personal reasons than anything else. I still have some family in
Okay.
the area, but
Okay.
the thing is, it was hard leaving because you sort of knew in the back of your head that Gary did not have Ford, GM, Chrysler, didn't even have Nissan or Toyota as being a headquarter. Gary's history was always about steel. Outside of the Jacksons, Gary, the U.S. Steel mill was one of the largest in the world, and the city was built around that. And there's places in the Midwest in the United States that were built around a plant or a particular company. Go to Michigan, you can go to Saginaw and Flint. They were built around GM plants, basically. And then, of course, as most people know, the automakers shrank in size, and when they did, that kind of took the fortunes of those areas with them as well, in a lot of respects. So it was a little hard because you grow up with this thing in the back of your head that says, if you're going to succeed or if you want to step into a particular venue, you need to come outside of where you are. But you know what, Dr. Vibe, that's the history of Black folks, to be honest with you, because we've always had to migrate into something to get somewhere, basically. I did a presentation about a year ago on Juneteenth, and one of the things I was emphasizing was about the Black migration and how that impacted a lot of choices for the types of businesses that came up and the type of communities that came up. Is how we ended up with Tulsa and Black Wall Street down there, basically.
Nice.
So I think we always have had a thing in the back of the head. Don't get me wrong. And there's some areas where people like, hey, I grew up in Chicago all my life and that type of thing. There are places where people can kind of go and not leave, but
yeah,
we've always had to be the people. If you particularly going into venues where we're the only folks or the only face in that room, you're traveling someplace. So there you go.
Nice. If you can recall any memories you had working at Ford, what was that like?
Oh, that was a dream. That was a dream for me. And it was I say that because it was I didn't think I really just was very focused as a kid. I just really it was like, gotta get to the car industry. Okay. Well, I sat there with my mom. She's like, well, what do you want to be? Well, I want to be a car dealer. She's like, well, do you want to build cars or do you want to engineer them? Well, I think I want to engineer them. I'm like, okay, then you got to be an engineer. And I had step by step that was just very ordered for me. And I think the challenge for me was when I got into Ford, I loved it, loved being there. Had a Mustang 5.0 for a couple of years.
Oh, you go, G 5.0 Mustang. All right.
96 GT.
Wow.
Wow. I got a good story about sliding in the snow in that too. That was funny.
You can share that if you want right now.
I'll share that real quick. I was supposed to be coming out of I was supposed to quote unquote race a friend back home. And we were both coming out. She had a Escort GT. I had a Ford Mustang GT. Her car was front wheel drive. And this was in winter in Michigan. We were just coming out of a restaurant, and all we were doing was just trying to race ourselves, who could make it back to our apartment, to either one of our apartments before the other person. Sure. She pulls out, she get, and with that front wheel drive traction, she was able to kind of get out in the snow. Me with the rear wheel drive V8, and this is before traction control really was stepping in on those cars. Couldn't even get it out of slot. I had to go back into the restaurant to get the chef and cook crew to come out and push my car out of slot that was parked, because I'll hold my hands if you can see it. The car was kind of, the rear wheels were spinning, and they were spinning just enough where if I tried to come out, I would have hit the car next to me.
Ouch. And
so I was it was like not quite an hour, but it was close to like a good 40-minute for what should have been a 10-minute drive back. She and I had a big laugh about it later, but that was the that nice. Was kind of like, okay, we won't slide out anymore. But cool story. But to the earlier question on Ford, I'll say this real quick. It was what I wanted to do. And I think by the time I wanted to do a graduate degree, I kind of knew I had to leave Ford a little bit, because I didn't really I didn't want to go into management. I thought the management there was not they weren't bad, but they really weren't like developing people very well. And a lot of the people who were giving me advice were lifers, and there's nothing wrong with having people who are lifers in a company. It's just that they don't have a vision for growing something. And I had a secondary dream of trying to do venture capital and VC, which was how I ended up going to do in the analytics. I'll get to that in a moment. But it was I knew I wanted to grow and do something. And to what you said earlier, this was also a time where, again, Black person realizing that if you want to step and do certain things, you can't stay where you are. and that's what ended up happening. So, but it was a good time. I loved it. It's just kind of one of those things where it's like I knew that this wasn't where I needed to be. If I stayed there where it was, there's no. I trust me. If the next layoff, they would have pushed me out the door, just like they did a lot of people. So, yeah.
So let me ask, the time span between leaving Ford and creating Zimana, what was in between that?
Oh gosh. This is where I put that the 10 Commandments, Moses, going out into the wilderness, or I like to put a little spin on it, basically. It's a little romantic, but I'll roll with it. Charlton Heston, forgive me. It was, I wanted to do VC, and I had this grand idea of doing venture capital for Black businesses in mind. Great idea. In fact, actually, there are people who are doing this now. But at the time, it sort of was a hard bridge to kind of cross over, and it was something where I didn't really how can I put it? By the time I got through my graduate degree, I was sort of off the pace a little bit about how to get into that industry. VC is not a simple industry to crack, but I would say now it's changed a little bit where it may not even be necessary to go through investment banking or to do a startup to be a VC. And I really wanted to come up with something that would keep Black businesses in my circle. That was important to me, and to network with people no matter who they were, whether you were somebody. I'm not frat, but I wanted to keep a door open for somebody who was not, basically.
Right.
So, and the way that I got to analytics was that I worked at a government contractor started by my cousin Anita. And she had grown this business. It was 1,500 people under her employ. And one of the things that came in there, and this was accidental that I got there. It was just, they were just giving me a job, literally. That's all it was. But one of the things that came up was there was a lot of questions on how do we know people review websites and then decide to do business with us. And Google Analytics was just coming into play. And so I used the tool, and I started thinking maybe this might be a better way of approaching smaller businesses. And it took a while, but by the time that I launched in 2009, I knew that I had something going. I was around enough people to kind of learn and get some ropes a little bit and decide that, okay, maybe this is something I could build off of. And it gave me a great way of leveraging my MBA background, my engineering background, because a lot of things are problem solving. And it's a great way of meeting and talking to people too. You learn a lot from business owners. A lot of times I talk about metrics and technology, but the decisions to put those things in place comes from how you talk to people and what they're trying to do. And that teaches you a lot of what to do and what not to do as well.
So how did that lead into Zimana?
Good question. Well, I knew that so for me, Zimana was supposed to be like the grand VC dream, but I twisted it to work around analytics with analytics as a core service. And that made the discussions about small businesses a little easier. Most businesses, the big problem that they do is that they usually need financial help, but to get really good financial help, it's just like your health. You got to talk to somebody early enough to be able to make certain decisions. If there's a breaking point where, like, hey, it's too late to fix this break-even point in helping your business, basically, because you need more sales and you don't have enough runway or enough cash flow to do it. But with analytics, you are talking more about marketing and a little bit more about strategy that ties into certain decisions on, whether or not which digital ads do you do, which platforms do you do that on, which products do you lead with. Not every product should be in a digital ad. Some things are how can I put it? They're such a commodity that the sales would not make sense. You're spending $5 to only make $3 or something ridiculous like that, if that makes sense. So the discussions were much earlier. But I'll tell you up front, it was still very hard to do. I've been in business now for about 14 years. And it took a lot of iterations to kind of get to this point to even have these good conversations or good, insights. But it took a lot of interacting with people. It took a lot of interacting with people in different venues. The thing that I found that was interesting was I thought that I was going to get more retail businesses up front. I actually got more influencers, more media companies. CMS Wire, for example, I've been writing for them now for now. I think now it's running on 8 years at least. And it was just freelance. Yeah, it was very happenstance. And that writing and those putting those insights together helped me in building an audience. It helped me in connecting with people that led to sales and kept building traction. So you have to pick very well in terms of services that you offer, because otherwise, if you don't, it becomes very hard to run a business these days.
When you started Zimana, how many other melanated people were in that space?
Not many. I may be the first.
I had a feeling, but I don't make assumptions. So how did it feel being a real minority in that space?
It's a tap dance. It's a tap dance. You know, I joke about Rhythm Nation, but you gotta pretend that people are behind you. Basically, you know, you have to have.
I would love to do a show one day with you, and you came into the live, and Janet Jackson would be there. I would love to see the look on your face.
Oh, that would be great.
Stop your noise now. Easy.
Yeah, that do the countdown. 5.
There you go.
Yeah. So, but it was to the question. It was a little tricky. You have to. Business owners have a difficult time being. I don't want to say militant. I don't want to say that. The social consciousness part, I think, is always a little bit of a struggle, because for business owners, you're concerned about making a dollar, which means you are looking at the products you offer, the services that you offer. But if you want to look at Black economics, it's not just selling things. It's also about, what's the exchange of products and services? Is it the right cycle through the community? And so there's always a little bit of tension between making the dollar, which you need to kind of keep things open, just, to be blunt, versus the things that probably the community needs best and most. And we're seeing a little bit of that being digitized right now. That's a big part of it. All the stuff about data privacy that impacts us. I mentioned about looking for where we are in terms of looking for other Black consumers and looking for Black businesses. That's digitized right now. The other thing is that I think the differences between Black businesses back when the days of Ebony and Jet and Black Enterprise first started versus now is that now you have certain corporate interests, like Target it has a Black History Month section, and they have they've actually profiled Black business owners, which is a good thing. But now you have this a dueling I don't want to say conflict. More like you have another platform that as a Black business owner, you still have to serve in some capacity, basically. And that can be a little bit of a challenge, basically, in, things that you want to do versus things you have to do. I'll give you a really good example. When I first started, I was in Brooklyn, New York, where I started Zimana. And I met a man. He had a contracting business. The name of it was Minority Black Contractors, which was kind of a struggled name a little bit, but I liked who he was, and we actually vibed pretty well. And one day he wanted to put together a second website. He wanted to put it with just white faces on there. And I said, well, why would you want to do that? And I said, well, he said, well, I want to attract higher end customers, but I'm a little concerned that they would see my crew and not hire us. And so I talked to him a little bit about this. I sort of got where he was going with it. And I know that contractors have a hard time. But I said, the other problem that you're introducing, though, is that, number one, you're telling your crew, who was mostly Black, some Hispanic, I think. I told him, I said, you're kind of giving them a message that they're not good enough to be in somebody's home. So that might be a problem for you if you're trying to recruit people. The second thing is that as a Black business owner, do you really want your first dollar from somebody coming from a bigot? Do you want there's something psychologically that puts a strain on you, because now this is somebody that you have to serve. The customers you serve, I'm not saying everyone's got to be, necessarily aligned with everything going on in the community, because even within the community, we disagree.
Yeah.
But You definitely don't want to launch a business where you are reliant on a bigot to serve you, because they're not going to serve you, and that's not what you want. Put your foot. And I told him, and it worked. I convinced him to not go that route. But it interests me, Dr. Vibe, because it was the fact that you could put something on a website and present yourself in a way that's too radically different from who you are. There's some things that are somewhat okay to play with, but there's some other things that you've got to know when it's pushing you too far out the envelope, and it's not true to your audience. It's not true to the people you want to serve. It creates more. It does more than fraud. It creates a lot of problems, basically. But it was an interesting take on it. So, and he's not the only one who I've run into with that sort of discussion. Basically, there's always a thing about websites. What do you put on there? How do you present? What do you go after?
So I'm already going to say this to Pierre live. You're coming back, by the way. Just telling you that, because you're dropping so many knowledge bombs that we need to have you come back and go a little bit deeper on some of this stuff. But let me ask, as a conversation piece, how, from your lens, has the pandemic impacted Black business?
That is a good question. I think it exasperated. I think the businesses that struggled, struggled worse. In fact, actually, I just found out an incubator that I went to in Chicago. I don't think it's opened up anymore. I don't think they're going to reopen because of the pandemic. I think it's been harder on us in some ways because of the fact that not every. I talk about, we hear about Black Twitter and people being online, but not everybody operates online, and not everybody operates in the same way. And I think the pandemic has hurt in some ways in terms of being able to network with people, being able to network with each other effectively, being able to build sales, being able to find resources. And I think being online helps out a lot, because I say a lot with a little bit of the air quote around here, basically. So it helps out a lot because you can find people to network with and talk to. The fact that you and I are talking to each other through a digital medium is phenomenal. I had a VA she was based out of Kenosha, Wisconsin. Very terrific lady. We were able to get a lot of things done. She did a lot of things done with a spreadsheet that helped me in trying to develop a package. Being able to find resources is the number one thing that the internet, I think, has been a benefit. But at the same time, it's put a lot of our conversation on Front Street in some ways. It's put a lot of our struggles on Front Street, and now we have to be discerning on who can help and who may not be helping. And you see this all the time, whether you go to Clubhouse, you see a lot of people talking, but not really doing much of anything. You can also have people who are committing. I've had people try to come up to me with fraud, to be quite honest, too. So you have to. So I think it's a double-edged sword. I think it's helped us in connecting to the right resources, but I think there's a shift in how we communicate, and not just for Black people. I think it's also for all people globally, but for Black people in particular, it's a shift. And we have to think a little more critically about, if we are going to interact with each other, what's that, what's the next step beyond a hello? How do people follow up? The fact that some resources don't stay in business all the time. I mentioned about the incubators before. Things disappear. How do we replace them? Black Twitter is a big deal. That was very instrumental, in George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, and a number of movements, basically. So the fact that Elon Musk takes over and takes away the moderation, that's a big change. How do we respond to that overnight? And it's not something we can ignore. It's social media and technology they're integral in our lives, whether we realize it or not. If you drive a car, you're driving technology. If you go to a refrigerator to get frozen meat, that was a technology that kept your meat cold. We have technology around us. It's just some things we don't call tech. We've just gotten used to it, and we've learned how to use it. And this is going to be the same type of thing, whether we're talking about programming, data science. You and I had this conversation too. Whether you are producing, basically, that's a big deal. So we have to. We're going to be stepping a little differently. That's for sure.
Absolutely. So just do a little reset here. We're speaking with Pierre DeBois, founder and CEO of Zimana. We're talking many different things, digital, etc., all over the place. If you have any questions, especially if you're watching this live, please put them in the chat. I know Pierre will do his absolute best to answer them. Let's continue on. The world of digital marketing, ever evolving, ever changing. Let me ask you, how has digital marketing changed from the time you entered this space to where it's at now?
Ooh. Okay, that's a whole nother show.
Okay, we can touch a little bit later, but we're just teasing here, but we will do a show just on digital marketing, but just in your journey, how has it changed, especially on the impact of melanated people?
I think it's helped a little bit in terms of, I mentioned about communication. That's the big one. Things that I remember growing up that were just maybe limited to just us, so to speak, kind of like a FUBU moment, if you want to call it that. They're more out there. And I think people hear that, and I think they're picking up more of that nuanced vibe. Sometimes that's a good thing. I think politically, people use it to work against us, basically, a little bit. But I think socially, it's helped out a little bit in some terms. A great example would be just the reactions that people have had about policing, the brutality over policing. A lot of that took place on Twitter, took place around hashtags. Hashtags are the town halls. A lot of people call Twitter the town halls, but it's really the hashtags. And it's how people have used those to have a conversation back and forth. And sometimes, the conversations are a little bit more gritty. Things that you might hear on even like an RB morning talk show, like the Breakfast Club, for example. I remember growing up, those sort of talks, you can only hear those on the radio. And the people, and granted, airwaves went far, but it was always around, your people. And you can even when you got to work, you kind of know, like, oh yeah, did you hear about what Steve Harvey talked about? I'm like, oh yeah, I heard about Steve Harvey and so. But now you have, something like a Breakfast Club can be played on YouTube, can be played repeatedly. The fact that we can do this on a smartphone made it more convenient for that to be played back whenever we want it. It allowed us to dissect and hear ourselves a lot more, and allowed others to dissect and hear ourselves a lot more. And I think that type of communication, I think it's been beneficial in some ways because it allowed more of us to have a voice rather than just how can I put it? Like in music, remember how you had like pop music and how pop musicians were always got the mainstream attention, but the people who the guys of the world and Teddy Riley's of the world, they didn't quite get the attention beyond R&B. I think now that's been broken down quite a bit, and this generation that's come up underneath us have really pushed that at quite a bit. Having said that, I think there's new challenges of who's telling our story, who's telling our narrative, particularly for things that are important in terms of facial recognition. The fact that I think there was something in the news about somebody getting arrested because facial recognition failed to identify that person correctly. There was a man in Detroit that got arrested falsely because of facial recognition. So we need to have not only Black people or people of color in those discussions for how that technology is built, but how that technology is used. And I think for what's changed particularly in the last several years, is that more of this discussion is no longer limited to something academic or something that's niche. We're hearing more of that as part of the discussion, which is a good thing. And I'll say this real quickly. I think the other thing for us that's changed is, for Black people, there's a lot of us in different circles, whether you're talking about LGBTQ, or if you're talking about people who are coming from biracial backgrounds, or people who are coming from from rural areas, or from areas that that normally are not are not the traditional New Yorks, Chicago's, and LA's of the world. Basically, we're hearing more of that, and I think that's a good thing, and I think that helps our narrative. And I think now is our future. We got to think about how that narrative is being retold among us.
You're right. That's a whole separate show.
Did I cover enough ground? I hope I did.
Yeah, well, you just scratched the surface. That's really wild. But we have a question here from
Okay.
let me just see here. Don G. Great information, Pierre. Thank you. As a small business, how do you find which platforms your target market lives on?
That's a good question. I've been very social media heavy for a while. Twitter has been the main one that I've used for quite a bit. But it's a mix. But I'll tell you what the real truth is. It's a little bit of a mix of you use the social media to you network around with people in real life in terms of places you go to. I try to get to as many things for tech and for many things for Black business owners as much as I can, so that way I can meet people, talk to them, and then I use the social media to tie those things together. Your social media is, whether you use Twitter, whether you use YouTube, whether you're using Clubhouse, you're doing any of the social audio apps, for example, it should be an extension of how you greet and talk to people, so that way they remember you and at least get you on the board. That's a big part of this. When I first started, to Dr. Vibe's earlier question, a lot of times in 2009, 2008, a lot of this was still geared towards advertisers and to some cases tech. And then it took a while for mainstream people to kind of adopt and find ways to use. And that's kind of the cycle that goes through for technology all the time. That's just how it is. You start with a niche and then the audience adopts, basically. But what you want to do as a business owner is you need to think about, I would say the big thing I would think about going into this year and beyond, most platforms are thinking about communities, and you need to kind of think about, where are the communities that you can network with in terms of a mix of chamber of commerce or something in real life, plus things that you do through Twitter, through a Discord. It could be, again, through Clubhouse is a great, it's still, they've got some struggles, but it's still a great platform to use. And if you don't use that, look at things like a LinkedIn event or Twitter Spaces, basically. But the point is, you need to have a blend of real life and a little bit of digital to make it work. With one without the other kind of leaves you too isolated, and it breaks your marketing. And then find ways to connect with people in between, with your content, with email, with even with talks like this too.
You haven't mentioned one platform, so I got to bring it up. TikTok.
Oh yeah, I'm not a TikToker, not yet, basically. TikTok is still useful. But I would also tell people, don't feel that if you have not been on TikTok, do not feel like, okay, if I don't, I think the day of chasing a social media platform in particular is sort of waning a little bit, because we're becoming more federated. There's way more breakdown of different platforms that overlayer on top of other platforms. I mentioned about Clubhouse, for example. Clubhouse, Twitter Spaces, LinkedIn events, and Spotify Green Room are all audio chats. And so what I can do with my smartphone is that when I can't make a real life event, I can host a room and talk to people. These type of platforms made it possible for me to connect with people. I'm actually a member of Greater New York Chamber of Commerce. And one of the things that we do is we talk to each other through Clubhouse and LinkedIn events as well. We still do Zoom, but the point is that this gives a platform to connect with people in between. And I think what's happening is that this layered effect, this sort of, think like a Jenga puzzle, where you have like a Jenga piece here, Jenga piece here, there a piece, everywhere a piece. The idea is that you have a couple of pieces that you can that you have to slot together to make a communication channel. And I think that's becoming a little easier because a lot of these platforms are overlapping a little bit in terms of features. So I would say use these to layer and talk to people as much as possible.
Good stuff. As we go on, as time's starting to wind down quickly here, so we'll get some other stuff in before that we finish up. Analytics. I'm going to be totally honest. Up until like 2-3 years ago, I didn't pay attention, really deep dive into analytics. So don't cuss me out. But now, especially, my greatest engagement platform is YouTube, and I am fiercely looking at my YouTube analytics all the time. How many viewers? I know for people who haven't been on for a while, my channel finally passed 1,000 subscribers on YouTube the other day, a few days ago. So I'm looking at average view duration, all those different analytics. Can you share with our, especially our melanated audience who wants to do something with social media, how important analytics are and what sort of analytics should they be looking for? What are
Okay,
the important analytics?
good question. The short answer to that is that a lot of time analytics is it's still a little bit of a dry subject, but it's still an important one. Most people hear that, and then in fact, back to the earlier question you said, back in 2009, most people thought of it as just SEO, and it's not really about that. You have different marketing channels that you use. You have SEO, digital ads, social media, and they have social media ads that's in there. Email campaigns is another one. You mentioned about YouTube. Video is a big deal. Each one of these are different channels. And one of the questions that you want to ask if you're any sort of business owner is, which channels am I getting customers coming through? Or which channels am I, and I'll use Dr. Vibe, for example, if you're getting subscribers, which ones are leading to more subscribers? If you're an influencer and you are selling, there's a lot of people who sell products, a lot of people who have podcasts. You're interested in kind of figuring out what things worked in the past that you may be able to build upon a little bit to get the word out for your next event or your next thing. Your analytics should help you do that. If it's just telling you how many followers you have, don't get me wrong, that's a great start, but there's a breaking point where it's not giving you more information. It's kind of like, well, I got more people in May, I got less people in June. I got more people in July, got less people in August. That type of up and down isn't what you want. You want to look at what the sources are that are leading to it, that are consistent, and then figure out what you can communicate to those channels. And that's usually how you build out. Google Analytics, a lot of people hear that quite a bit. It's how can I put it? It's ubiquitous basically because it's free, but you pay for people to either do the analysis, which can be very extensive, or you pay people for training, basically, which actually I'm also working on some courses to help people train a little bit more on that. And as I'll get to that in a moment. But a lot of that is it's been used for quite a bit, and it's usually a core analytics for tying those pieces together. That's usually what's been the case. In the last couple of years, that's been changing around a little bit. There's other tools like there's actually there's one called Google Looker, which was called Google Data Studio at one point. That's actually really good if you have APIs and different streams of data coming in. That's been a new thing. There's another one called Adobe Analytics, but for most people, that's not something you would use because that's more for the Macy's and the Targets of the world, because it's really an expensive thing. Multimo, which I think I pronounced that correctly, which used to be called Piwik, that's a counter to Google Analytics. It's not as well known, but you can use that and get some basic metrics off of that. One quick thing on the social media analytics can help you in terms of followers and it helps you with engagement, but keep in mind every platform's analytics is just for that platform. So Twitter analytics may be great if Twitter's all you use. It's the most obvious thing. But if you're using different platforms, you need something like a Google Analytics or something that will help centralize a lot of the data to help you make some quick decisions. I'll admit to that it's not easy at the beginning, but when you use it to organize your time effectively, you'll stay in business a lot longer.
I know your world is full of acronyms, and I know when you mention what they are, but I think for our audience, you mentioned two acronyms. If you could just break it down for us, SEO and API. Okay.
SEO is search engine optimization. This is basically it's been around since websites have basically started. But what it is if you have a website, your website is made up of different files. A file for a background, file for your text. It's HTML that's the code underneath that holds it together. You can present a web page, but you need to optimize it so that way when the search engine is querying, it looks for particular information and whether it matches up to that query. And that's what optimization is. You have tags that are on the top of your, you don't see them on a regular web page, but if you look at the underlying code, you would see descriptions, tags, each element, you have opportunities to label those elements. Most web developers, when they first launch a website, it's usually not done in an optimized manner. And that's okay. Optimization is something you do over time to figure out, where you want to spend your time. And the reason you also do it is because traditionally, I'll say traditionally now, when you run digital ads, you need to know where those ads should be placed. And without the SEO, it's kind of hard to do that correctly. You can actually blow a budget really bad if you're not careful. Real quick, I'll define APIs real quickly. API stands for application protocol interface. And all it is a portal between the software that you use that lets it share data. So for example, when you have Google Calendar and Calendly working together, so that way you can kind of sync up and have the same schedule, that's an API. There's an API on both ends that has to be synced up together. Now, this is a little bit more, I don't want to call it mechanical, but it's a little bit more technical than what most people get into. But it's still, if you're trying to develop an app, it's still something you may need to understand, because if you're developing an app or some sort of software, you need to know who you can work with in your ecosystem. That means understanding what APIs are out there and then understanding the documentation behind it. So it's a different piece, but it's if you're looking at creation and thinking about platforms, that's something to keep in mind.
Pierre's dropping knowledge, family. Dropping knowledge, dropping knowledge. She's on fire. Love it, love it. And Don G says, nice, thank you. So he appreciates what you're sharing.
Thanks, Don. Great question too.
No problem. In our remaining moments, unless something else comes up, I'd like you to talk about what tech trends are happening among Black businesses from your lens.
Ooh, good one. That's also another. We're going to have multiple shows. I can tell that.
I have no difficulty with that.
We're seeing a lot more. You mentioned about APIs. There are more people developing apps and platforms, which is a good thing. The best evaluations you're seeing with people are developing apps and platforms. Most people have learned from Uber and from Grubhubs of the world that you build this platform and you build the services around it. This is almost Amazon. It's Amazon basically. So I think people have learned that part. The downside is I think some people have also learned to automate a little too much. There is such a thing as, some people have seen Amazon and figured, well, gee, they don't need to know me. They didn't know Jeff Bezos, so they just knew Amazon and just shop there. Amazon had VC money behind it. They had a real good runway and burnt through a lot of cash before they were profitable. Most of us, let's get real, most of us are not quite like Jeff Bezos, basically. So the problem becomes, you really need to, I would say that there's a tipping point between, you want to be able to build a business, and maybe if you're building an app, build maybe the services around it, but don't automate everything so much that you don't have any sort of customer experience, any customer service, or follow through. Those things are very important. They are the killer app if you're starting a business, because they're the things that make you. It's the things that make your business unique, and it helps you to stand out. A lot of people, I know a lot of people that they've planned these businesses to be, hey, I just want to sell some junk and make some money. They've heard the smart hustle mantra a little too much. And those tools are important, but you need to be able to it's how you put those things together that makes it profitable and sustainable. Otherwise, all you're doing is just hustling on the street, and it's a digital street, but it's still hustling in a way that doesn't get you going, and it doesn't build community. So I think that will be a struggle for us for a long time. I don't think it's just about necessarily just as Black business owners. I just think it's with technology right now. Like I said at the beginning, there's a lot of great options that people can pursue, which is terrific. But the struggle with having too many options is that you can also make some choices that are not really conducive for building a business correctly.
It's come up my alleged mind. AI is coming hard, man.
Yeah.
AI
Yeah,
is coming hard, and
yeah,
I'm trying to get my head wrapped around, especially with what I do, because I know that it artificial intelligence is going to change what I'm doing.
yeah, yeah. And by the way, I'm a chatbot. No, just kidding.
I don't hold anything back
I
against
might
you.
as
I
well
don't
be
doubt
at
you
this
anyway.
point. Yeah.
But
It, it,
but
it, it-
but AI, what's the impact through your lens about AI going forward? Because I'm I'm starting to try to understand the impact it on broadcaster like myself, and what do I use, what don't I use, and I'm sure many of our melanated business owners probably aren't even aware, and they may just be left behind.
yeah, I think chat GPT, I'll take it from there and see if we can build up. Chat GPT is a chat bot that's been generating a lot of buzz. Very good chat bot. You ask questions and it gives you a lot of really good, I see with air quotes, relatively good answers. The challenge, in fact, actually has been so good that people think that maybe it's its own, it could be its own search engine. Reportedly, Google is coming up with its own version of the AI for Chat GPT, and Chat GPT, a Microsoft who's been an investor in OpenAI, who's the nonprofit that developed that chatbot, will incorporate Chat GPT into Bing. It's another for Azure machine learning as well, and maybe even some of this Office software as well too. That's rumored. I think that's rumored basically. But the point of this is that um, I think what AI will be is going to be, it's still going to remain in this assistant, kind of like a very sophisticated Amazon Alexa. With the differences is that uh, 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 we have to make adjustments in how we ask questions and get the support. I know when I write for CMS Wire, for example, I go through a lot of information I have to vet. Something like a Chat GPT can help summarize some things, but the big criticism right now from an ethics standpoint is that it's still trained on up to 2021, if I remember correctly, in terms of internet data. Um, and while it gives some really good prompts, it's not really when it comes to things like code and certain things that are very nuanced. It's still something that depends on how you ask the question. The answer you get back still needs to be vetted, basically. I'll give you a quick example. When I did R programming, I noticed that it would give there's a character called pipe, and it was just updated for 2022. And because Chat GPT only covers training up to 2021, it didn't include that pipe in its answers. Now, that doesn't mean that the answers are not structurally sound. It's kind of like it's the equivalent of saying a fire truck is a truck. But if I had a specific code for the color of the fire truck, equipment that I needed to have, I still need to vet that fire truck out. And for this case, for the code, I still need to vet it out to make sure that it functions, that it protects data privacy, for example. There's a number of things that, as a professional, that you need to still add to that response. And I think for all of us, AI will change how we interact, how we operate, basically, in terms of how we get support, where do we look for support, and how we vet and provide a nuanced answer, basically. So there you go.
Good stuff. And Sinva Cadella, I think voices of the opinion of a lot of people. AI, it's fascinating and scary at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. I try not to get too much into the the doom and gloom. I've had people write articles about how Microsoft Excel is no longer it will no longer be around, and people have been writing that for like 20 years now. So I think the one thing I'll leave you with this. The one thing I would say is, yes, there are some things that are game changers, but the game changers sometimes have a funny way of letting the stuff that gets outdated find a new audience. Basically, it's kind of like vinyl. We always talked about CDs being the death of vinyl, and yes, there was a decline in the request for vinyl records, but there were still record shops still selling vinyl records. And the fact that we still even have record shops made a big deal, basically. So I would say don't get too, just keep picking up on news a little bit about what things are changing. I think this thing with GPT still needs to play out a little bit. And I think because I think having a chat bot that's so wide open takes away a context for it that doesn't where it has some great applications and then not so great applications. I think the universities who are looking at banning the use of chat GPT is still interested. So there's a lot of debate about that, and some people raise some good points, like this is an opportunity to teach students how to work with the technology, not just to ban it necessarily. But I think we have this balance between, we want to streak to the future, but we also got to ask, what are we streaking to? And I think with technology now, the big problem is, what is the problem we're trying to really solve? It's great that this thing does X, Y, and Z, but who is asking for X, Y, and Z, and why?
Wonderful. Well, you brought warmth to my heart because you mentioned vinyl, and my dad is actually a member of the Vinyl Record Collectors Association of America. He's in their Hall of Fame. So if you ever make it to Toronto, I'll certainly bring you by his house, and you'll see vinyl. You'll see vinyl like you've never seen, like boxes and 45s and things like that. He had a man cave long before it became man cave. even to the point where he still has a reel-to-reel recorder.
Oh wow. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But Pierre, the time has flown by, and I'd really like to thank you for taking the time to share with us today. As I said, you're setting up for some more conversation pieces where we can dive deeper into specific aspects if you're more than willing to. Any final thoughts you'd like to share with our family today?
I'm always around, basically. So if you're looking at, shameless plug, if you're looking for analytics, definitely there's a lot of great information that's being offered here today. And like I said, I think the thing is, if you're thinking about starting a business, I know there's a lot going on, but I know there's a tech layoff that's just happened with Microsoft in particular. The one thing I can tell you is, I'll say this real quick. When I started my business, I delayed it a little bit. I was supposed to start in 2008. Had a friend said, "Hey, why don't you come work with us for a second?" And I did it for a little bit. 6 months later, I was laid off. And but the thing is, I still kept my website up at the time because I knew in the back of my head, I said, okay, if this doesn't work, I still want to go into it. And when I got laid off, I threw myself into it. I say this to say there's never really a right time. You can do all the due diligence, definitely understand if there's a market. I think that's important. But as far as like throwing yourself into it, do not assume that there's going to be a right time. That's just like saying that you can play basketball and the only thing you can do is just make 3-pointers. And 3-pointers are great, don't get me wrong. Ask Stephen Curry, but you still need to be able to do other things to get things going. And I think that's the thing that you need to look at if you're starting a business. And that will if you're willing to put the work in and all the other pieces, that's telling you right off the bat that you have a chance for success.
Wise wisdom words from Pierre DeBois. So Pierre, thank you so much. And his contact information is there. I've shown it periodically through our conversation. Reach out to him. Ask for some of his valuable time. He's got a lot of knowledge, a valuable experience, and can also see a little bit ahead than most of us can't or don't know what to talk about. So again, thank you so much for everything you do and what you're going to be doing going forward. And you always can have a home here. Anything we can do to help you out, please feel free to reach out.
And the same here with me too. I look forward to being. I'm definitely want to come back and keep talking. So this is
absolutely, a good and we'll be having offline conversations so I get some insights.
Okay, there you go.
All right. Remember to give yourself grace and don't just manage your time, manage your energy. All right. And there's Pierre's contact information. Great conversation, family. And wow, was he dropping knowledge bombs? Like a lot of that stuff, I have no idea. Like I knew what SEO and API meant. So I felt, at least I'm in the same room. I can at least talk up about that. But it was really good stuff today. Got a comment here. Yeah, Cinema Canella. Yeah, she loved it. Fantastic. So before we close down, family, a few things. You can watch replays of this epic conversation called The Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Just put in the Dr. Vibe Show. Also, you can go to the website, the drvibeshow.com. As always, subscribe to the Dr. Vibe Show, especially on YouTube. And if you do it on YouTube, not only subscribe, but hit the notification button. Helps with the analytics, helps with the algorithms, which are always changing. Maybe that's another thing we didn't even bring up. We got to talk about algorithms the next time, or have a show on algorithms. And also like it on Facebook. You can also follow me on, they call that LinkedIn thing. A reminder here, if you're watching this before February 2nd, you can join me on February 2nd and February 16th, 2023. I might as well put that because you may be watching this down the line. To talk all things podcasting, join me for a three-part, the last two of the 3 parts of a highly interactive free series about how to launch your podcast, or suggestions on how to launch your podcast, from a gentleman that's done over 4,000 online conversations. And that's in collaboration with Innovation Guelph. And 2, if you want to promote your business or service on your show, please contact me, dr@the drvibeshow.com. And also, if you just want to reach out to me in general, there's information. Website, thedrvibeshow.com. Email address, dr@the drvibeshow.com. YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, the drvibeshow. Twitter, @drvibeshow. And Instagram, the drvibeshow. I've got to get AI to read this in the future. Maybe I'll get AI to do all this reading in the future, so I save my mouth. I got to ensure my voice. That'd be a good idea. So as we leave off the conversation today, as always, live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions, then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Love, faith, and respect. Remember to give yourselves grace, and remember, subscribe, especially on YouTube. And you can catch me, I might as well tell you, other days through the week, Sunday afternoons, Black Canada Talking, Monday and Friday mornings at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. I do the Morning Vibe with Ryan Knight, co-executive director of the Afro-Canadian Business Network, and Saturday evenings at 9 p.m., State of Things with Aisha, Jill, and Lala. They are fire. And just Black Canada Talking on Sunday afternoons, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. God bless, peace well, keep the faith, and walk good.